Hello there. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Evan at Stryd. Thanks so much for watching another Stryd for the Love of Running webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about marathon training and racing with Stryd. Before we get started, if you are watching live right now, please feel free to send any questions through our YouTube chat or drop them in the Facebook comments as well in the Stryd Community Facebook group. If you're watching after the fact, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. Leave any questions you might have in the comment box below for the video as well. We'd be glad to answer them. You can go to stryd.com/guide to learn more and also tell us what you want to learn more about. And we're really excited to continue this series as well as improving our stryd.com/guide for you. Like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about marathon training and racing with Stryd. The past couple weeks has been focused on improving 5,000 meter performance, 5K performance with Stryd. We're going to spin a little bit and we're going to talk about some marathon stuff as well. This is not going to get super in depth. We're going to have more in this series to come. So let us know what you want to think or what you think you'd like to know about this subject as well. So marathon training and racing with Stryd. What we'll cover, a few different marathons at different efforts. This is going to be my data, so I can give a little bit more insight about some of the specifics here. What not to do on marathon race day. I am very good at telling you what not to do on marathon race day because I have done it and I have suffered that experience to pass the message on to you. And then also how to use Stryd to lock into an effort over varying terrain. Some of the race examples we're going to look at are going to talk about that, but also just a general Stryd principle. Running with power principle is going to help you lock into a very specific effort, no matter what the conditions are. Benefit of training with power. This has been in the past couple presentations, but just in case you haven't watched the past couple ones, I want to go over this. Power is objective. It doesn't fluctuate due to outside factors like temperature. And with the new Stryd with air resistance, it helps you understand the environment that you are running in. You have a detachment from focusing only on time. You can compare efforts no matter what scenario you're running in, and you can focus on your current ability and output. So let's talk about the first thing here. This is going to be one of the key takeaways. If you have not used it before, the Stryd Race Power Calculator is going to be one of the most helpful tools and important tools that you can possibly use in the Stryd ecosystem. You can find this by going to stryd.com/powercenter, clicking on the left-hand side and clicking on the little tool icon. It'll bring you to the Race Power Calculator. Or you can go into your Stryd mobile app and create a new event and play around with the Race Power Calculator there. The reason this is so important is it helps you unlock an understanding about your current fitness, your current ability that Stryd understands, and how it translates to different racing abilities. So if you are using Stryd to train and race, the Race Power Calculator is a immensely important tool to understand. On Power Center, again, the example here, you're going to have a reference to the default. So right now in my profile, I'm training for a marathon sometime down the road. That's just what I've listed in my profile. It'll default to the marathon. It'll also default to a road surface, the trained at elevation for the last 90 days. So my average is about 4,500 feet. I had a little stint, a little week and a half stretch around about sea level. So it's a little bit lower than my normal training environment here in Boulder, Colorado. Normal training temperature, and then your humidity that you have trained at. And then you can adjust all these fields, whether you're racing at a different altitude, whether you're racing at a different temperature, racing at a different humidity, you're racing on a track, a trail. All of these things are going to be really important to understand. But having a good understanding and good grip on at least changing the different inputs in the Stryd Race Power Calculator, whether that is in your Stryd mobile app on your phone or on stryd.com/powercenter, is imperative to you using Stryd to its best ability and helping you have the best chance of success on race day. So training specifics, let's talk a little bit about this example. So if I default the Stryd Race Power Calculator, it's going to default to 293 watts for a 26.2 mile race, which is also known as a marathon. If the surface is selected as road, my training elevation and my racing elevation are going to be this same the same thing here because I'm just defaulting to whatever I have as my sort of base as well. Temperature, it's been a little bit warm, but we're heading into some nicer conditions. I've been training at an average of 67 degrees Fahrenheit and a average humidity of 55% humidity. Let's take a look at a couple training examples. So we talked about the race power calculator. It's a great way to find some specifics for racing, but also training. So let's say I have a marathon coming up in 12 weeks, and I want to start to get an idea about some targets that I want to be hitting in training. Training to specifics is what the race power calculator can help you do. My marathon power at altitude, so the normal training environment, is 293 watts. So if I were to be training for the exact scenarios and the exact conditions of where I am living right now, I would use the race power calculator to give me this default, and I'd be able to use that to target training based off of. A couple examples of some workouts that I might have an idea of doing right now, about 12 weeks out, maybe 8 to 12 weeks out, something like that. 3 times 15 minutes at 100% of marathon power. So again, that's 293 watts. I might do 2 times 5 miles or 2 times 8 kilometers at 95 to 100% of marathon power. So that's going to be, for me, 278 to 293 watts. I might do a workout like 10 miles easy plus 10 miles at 90 to 100% of marathon power. And so that would come out to 263 watts to 200, about 93 watts. So it really helps to understand how to use, again, the race power calculator here to give you a default and to help you understand what your current ability is in your current situation, and then also be able to play around with that. So let's change up some of these specific inputs here. Let's say I had a target of running the London Marathon in a world where I could travel to London and be able to run the London Marathon course. If you go to stryd.com/power center, you can change the verified courses there, and we have a pretty big list to choose from that'll be expanding sometime down the road. Or you can input your own custom course, which I think is one of the coolest things. We can link out potentially, producer Kaylee, to the specific webinar we did announcing the race power calculator and showing how to upload the course. That is a great instructional video and a great webinar in itself as well. We can see how the inputs kind of change here. So saying here about a mile above sea level, here my power target is 293 watts and my estimated time is about 2 hours and 40 minutes. Then if I change it to running the London Marathon down at 36 feet above sea level, about 10 meters above sea level, racing in the same exact temperature, not even changing the temperature necessarily, my power target becomes 307 watts and my estimated time becomes 2 hours, 33 minutes and 9 seconds. And this is an important thing for you to understand as a training concept. If you are training to a specific intensity, so my intensity that I might be doing for marathon effort stuff at altitude might be 293 watts for me, but then my actual target is 307 watts. I might incorporate some of that goal intensity as well, not just what my body is able to do for a full marathon on that day. I might start to train at that goal as well. So this is what the race power calculator can help you find. So training to even more specifics, again, 3 times 15 minutes at 100% of marathon power becomes 307 watts. So that's about 14 watts higher than my altitude marathon power would be. 2 times 5 miles at 95% to 100% becomes 291 to 307 watts. And again, 10 miles easy plus 10 miles at 90 to 100% of marathon power becomes 276 to 307 watts. We will definitely be doing a follow-up webinar about some specific marathon sessions and how you can look at it the same way. One of the things I loved about last week's webinar was specifically talking about the methodology and how you can go through your own training and identify the different variables that you can switch around. So let's talk about actual race day. I'm going to give a couple examples here. These are going to be 2 different races that I have done. They were about a year apart, but they were both using Stryd. One of them was executed fairly well. The other was not, and I will show you why. This result here was at the Columbus Marathon. This was in October of 2019. It is my hometown race. It was my very first race in 2015. So to be able to come back a couple of years later, run it for the second time as the full marathon edition, it was a great opportunity to do. I had the goal of running just under 2 hours and 45 minutes, somewhere between 2:42-ish to 2:45, and help some women who were starting the race try and qualify for the U.S. Olympic Marathon trials. So I wanted to try and be very even, try and shepherd as many people as I possibly could to the finish line under that 2:45 mark. So the things to do when you're running a marathon with Stryd is to monitor your power in real time. So it sounds simple, but my example of what not to do will become very obvious later on. So monitoring power in real time, you have a couple different options for this, whether you use a Garmin, Apple Watch, Polar, Suunto, Coros, use your mobile phone and use the Stryd app. Monitoring your power in real time is just a great way to do exactly what you've done in training. So you've trained the same way. When it comes to race day, it's just another session. You just have to perform to your maximum output. What we talk about a lot is starting out slightly below your goal effort and give yourself the ability to finish well. This is sort of the case here. So the first about 9 miles or 15 kilometers of this race was run a little bit under some of the goal effort, and then through that middle about 15K to about 20K, getting in that good groove and then being able to pick it up a little bit towards the end here. Other thing to do, again, monitoring power in real time. This is the first half of the race, so about 1 hour and 21 minutes, something like that. You can see the elevation in the background here. For any of these hills on the course, slight inclines, declines, I just focused on keeping the lap power as consistent as possible. I was taking mile splits, each of the mile markers that were on the course. There's the clock at each mile marker, so it was very convenient for me to be able to pick out. But you can see how smooth this line is for power here, even with these inclines and these declines, these hills in the course here. And then once we hit that 15K mark, a little bit of a surge and then a little bit of a back off. But what to do? Monitor power in real time. Start out slightly below your goal effort and give yourself the ability to finish well. What to do? Adjust your effort over uphills and downhills. So this is the last half of the course, and we can see that there is a pretty flat section, a relatively steep incline, a little bit of flat, and then a longer decline. But we can see that even as the pace bounces around quite a lot, the power stays relatively consistent without a lot of spikes over critical power. And then it gives the ability to finish well down this little bit of a downhill. That pace really picks up towards the end. So adjust your effort over uphills and downhills. Just focus on staying at that exact target in mind. Again, what to do? This is that specific section here where it's about a 4.5 mile, maybe about 7 kilometer section where there is a relatively steep incline, a little bit of a flat section, then a longer downhill. We can see as this pace kind of bounces around, the power stays relatively consistent compared to the pace, no matter what the conditions are. What not to do. So this is going to be the California International Marathon in 2018. I had run it the year before, and I ran a PR of 2 hours, 18 minutes and 19 seconds. It was my second marathon, and it was a great marathon. I didn't pace very well. I died the last 4 miles. Same kind of case here. I still held on for a relatively good time. But this is a textbook example of what not to do. Even though I was using Stryd, I wanted to go in and just stick with the pack. So I did not wear a watch. First mistake. If I could go back, I would absolutely wear a watch. Second mistake, running by feel with the pack. This is usually a good strategy if you have a pace leader or you have a course that's relatively flat. But as you can see on this course, the California International Marathon course, there's all these tiny little spikes above critical power here. And these all represent a hill where somebody at the beginning of the pack sees their GPS watch pace starting to go a little bit lower than their goal. And so they surge up the hill to try and keep the pace consistent. And you can see that the pace stays relatively relatively even here until it starts to dawdle down at about 18 miles, about 30 kilometers into the race. And all of these points are me just surging with the pack. You can count them and you can see how many times in the early stages of a marathon that I just shot above critical power, and it ended up totally wrecking my race right about here, right about 18 miles, about 30 kilometers. And this slow, gradual decline, still trying to fight and hold on, but not really having the legs to run to that, last 10K that's so important in the marathon. The goal for me was to go in and run a new PR, but I really sabotaged myself by trying to stick with the pack and run other people's races and not focus on power. So even as a self-proclaimed running with power expert, I have made mistakes, so you don't have to. So this is an example of exactly what not to do. Not wearing a watch, even though I trained with a watch and I trained with Stryd to a very specific number, and then running by feel with the pack. So I want to look a little bit closer over the first half marathon here. So the first half of the race, we can count, the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 15, 20, 22 surges that were at least 20 seconds long above critical power as I run up hills, and then, surging on the pace on the downhills to try and keep up with the people surging down the downhills as well. So what not to do, surges over critical power, because if you do that, then you're going to have a second half of the race that looks something a little bit more like this. So we can see that in the first half here, all these spikes, that pace staying relatively consistent. We can see that power and that pace start to slowly die down as the rest of the course is a little bit of a downhill, and it overall leads to my failure of hitting my goal. We can see that the ground contact time increased a bit from 186 milliseconds to 194 milliseconds. Vertical oscillation went down, leg spring stiffness went down, cadence went down, pace went way down, power went down as well. So the very important thing, again, the highlighting the specific sort of things that we want to take away here are knowing how to use Stryd in training on the race power calculator, whether you're in stryd.com/power center, whether you're using the mobile app or on the web, using the data you have to train to your specifics, then enforcing that on race day. Knowing how to monitor your targets in real time helps prove your fitness. I've said this a couple times, and I really do like this quote, and just thinking about it this way: when you're training, you are trying to improve. So you're identifying a specific target, a specific area of your fitness that you're trying to work on, you're stressing it, and then you're recovering from it, and you're giving yourself, those positive adaptations. And then come race day, it's that time to prove it. It's that time to put everything you've practiced in training and just reinforce the fact that you deserve to hit that exact target that you've been training for. I showed an example of hitting an exact target, exactly what I was supposed to do. And I showed an example of exactly what I was not supposed to do. So using the race power calculator is something that I've been doing, especially since it's come out a couple months ago. I use that in my training and racing all the time as I'm doing these time trials. I know exactly what intensity to train to, whether that's a long run, whether that's some track work or a time-based interval session on the roads. Using the data that I have to train for the specifics as well is important. So if I'm running on the track versus running on the road, I know the courses I'm running on, so I know exactly what to expect. And I also know how to monitor targets in real time. So I know how to specifically use the exact targets that I've been training for and exactly run to perfection using the, whether you're using, Stryd app on the Apple Watch or your Garmin watch, whether you're using the Stryd Zones data field, whether you're monitoring on a Polar, Suunto, or Coros watch, you know how to monitor all those targets in real time. Let's flip gears here and see if we have any questions that were sent along. A lot of great questions, actually. So this is going to be a great section here. First question here is, what is the max mileage you hold for the marathon buildup? How many weeks do you maintain this mileage for? This is definitely going to be a personal preference. When I was in the best shape of my life a couple of years ago, I averaged about 120 miles a week for about 2 years straight, with peak weeks at 140 miles a week or 150 miles a week. And that did not seem very sustainable. Right now I'm running about 70 or 80 miles a week, and I'm actually in very, very good shape for some of the shorter stuff. In general, what is the max mileage you hold for the marathon buildup? This is going to be super personal, and it might be a gradual buildup over a couple years' time. How many weeks do you maintain this mileage for? Again, that's totally up to the coach that you're working with, the training plan that you're working off of. Generally, maintaining max mileage, you might have a peak week where you have 1 week that's a little bit higher with your longest run and maybe a longer workout. And then you might have, another set of 4 or 6 weeks that's a little bit below that. And you might have another 4 or 6 weeks that's a little bit step below that, or building up or tapering down. So great question. If I'm gearing up for a marathon, is it beneficial to plan out some shorter race efforts before the big day? Absolutely, especially when we talk about maintaining your auto-calculated critical power. It's important to not get too in the weeds with training, and remember that testing is training as well. So testing your ability at shorter efforts. 10 days before I ran my marathon PR in 2017, I ran a 4-miler, a 4-mile race, so about 6.4 kilometers. And I'd set a huge PR. I ran a little bit under 20 minutes for that. So averaged about 450 or 455 per mile, or about 305, 303 per kilometer, something like that. But even a week and a half out from my marathon, I was running at my best possible effort, and I gave myself plenty of time to recover afterward. But absolutely, it's okay, and it's beneficial to plan out some shorter race efforts before the big day. Some training plans call for something like a dress rehearsal. So, something like a half marathon with the first 10 miles at marathon goal power, marathon goal effort, and then the last 3 miles or last 5K of that half marathon, pick it up a little bit. Again, that reinforces that sticking at a very, very steady goal, and then giving yourself the ability to close out well. So it's absolutely beneficial, especially when it comes to training with Stryd, to plan out some shorter race efforts before the big day. Next question here is, there are a lot of models and tables that predict your marathon time based on 5K, 10K PRs. This does not work for slow twitch muscle fiber runners. Slow twitch runners may run a lot faster than the predictions. The Stryd model predictions reconsider all training efforts and are more accurate. Specifically for this, yes, the race power calculator looks at your fatigue factor based off your age, gender, characteristics of your model curve, and your power duration curve. So we take a lot more into consideration than just the time that you ran for a 5K or a 10K. And the other, again, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, being able to upload your custom course, whether you're doing loops around your neighborhood, whether you ran a race last year and you're targeting the same exact course, this helps put yet another layer on top of it. And it really, really shows how well the race power calculator and the whole Stryd system kind of comes together to just give you a whole another level above that, to help you understand not only your fitness heading into the race, but exactly personalized to you, the type of effort you should put forward. Let's see. Next question here is, I've recently got my Stryd and will have a marathon race after 7 weeks of usage. How accurate do you think the recommended target power in the race power calculator will be due to the limited data availability? Great question. If I have to say anything, it would be, again, focus on making sure that the auto-calculated critical power is accurate. And so we have a great webinar, great presentation on that. But if I could summarize that in a sentence or two, it'd be make sure you're getting in the little bit shorter high intensity, the medium length, medium intensity, and the longer, little bit lower intensity, making sure that you have a balance of efforts. But every run that you add to the Stryd system, it helps us understand your performance as well. But if we're talking about 7 weeks, that's absolutely enough time. Also, do you have any general total or weekly average mileage recommendations for 12 to 16 weeks of training leading up to a marathon race with a target finishing time of 3 hours, 30 minutes? Great question. And I think that, again, this varies. I don't have a general mileage recommendation. because there could be somebody that, they might have a ton of natural talent, grew up playing sports, and they can run a 3 hour, 30-minute marathon off of, something like 20 to 30 miles a week, or 40 to 50 kilometers a week, something like that. And then there are some people that might be slowly etching away. The mileage doesn't necessarily make it up. It's what your fitness is overall going into it. I would say the thing, if you focus on anything at all, is consistency. So focusing on the consistency for a longer training block, like 12 to 16 weeks, no matter if you're targeting a 3 hour, 30-minute marathon, a 5 hour, 30-minute marathon, a 2.5 hour marathon, consistency is going to be the name of the game for overall improvement. So I hope that answered that question. Next question here is, my power target is 93% of my critical power. Is that number a fixed number? It must depend on the individual runner's level. It absolutely does depend on the individual runner's level. When I pulled up my example of the race power calculator, it was 94% of my critical power if I am running at 5,400 feet above sea level. But then all of a sudden, when we drop it down to London and just a little bit above sea level, I can run at a little bit higher percent of my critical power, so about 95. It is not a fixed number. One of the great things about the race power calculator is that adding this extra couple layers on top of it for analysis, it's really let us be able to give a lot of these personalized power targets. Next question here is, let's assume that my desired goal race power is currently in the red range of the race power calculator because the assessment is beyond my current capability. Race is about 6 months away. Should I train to the specifics anyway? Yeah, this is a fantastic question. And this is, again, a training methodology question. And I'm super glad it got brought up. We talk about specifics for what you want to achieve. And that's super important in training. And when we look at current fitness, it's a great differentiator to understand what I want to achieve and what the Stryd system, based on all the data I put in, thinks that is in the range right now. When we're talking about a race 6 months out, I might suggest maybe for the next 12 weeks or so, the next 3 months or so, not being afraid to do either a critical power test, look for a weak spot on your power duration curve that might be holding your CP down a little bit, and then train to that critical power value right now for a couple of weeks, and then maybe do another time trial. Test, train, test, train, test, train, race. So I think that is a great question, because we can set these goals, and setting goals is a hugely important thing to giving yourself that room to improve. But specifically using the race power calculator, it shows you that, hey, if it's in this red range, it's a little bit outside of what we think you could hold on for right now, but there's no reason why you can't train for, goal marathon power a couple percentage lower, give yourself that additional fitness, sort of build that fitness, recover a little bit, and then watch that gap slowly shrink, and watch it hopefully before race day turn into that green range. Next question here is, how do you add a course for a race prediction when you've never raced there before? Yeah, this is great. And this is one of the things that we are doing with the race power calculator, specifically on its initial launch. We have a list of about 12 race courses that are verified from around the world, a couple half marathon, mostly marathon courses, the world marathon majors. Those specifically are the ones we've added in. We look forward to improving on this. We have had quite a large amount of people in the Stryd community on our Facebook group add different fit files or add different GPX files of different courses. And typically, if you search around, you can find an example, whether it is a fit file or a GPX file, a course map of a race if you haven't raced there before. So yeah, great question. We look forward to adding more to that down the road. But for right now, there are definitely some great suggestions, and we can link out to some of the suggestions after this gets published as well for anybody that is curious. That looks like it's it for any of the questions. If anybody watching after the fact, again, does have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to drop them in the comments down below, and we look forward to answering them. Just as a reminder, you can go to stryd.com/guide to find out all about Stryd, all about the new help stuff that we're adding in there. Let us know what you want to hear about. That is super helpful for us. It would also be super helpful if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a thumbs up here, and again, leave any questions that you might have. That wraps it up for this episode of the Stryd for the Love of Running webinar. We'll be back next week with another edition. Have a great one.